So thank you. I want to welcome everyone to a very exciting announcement around a pilot project that we are kicking off today. And I also want to welcome everyone to one of the most parking challenged neighborhoods in San Francisco, Russian Hill. I think it is well known that I do not own a car for good reason. But one thing I do want to mention is I used to live in Russian Hill. And I actually did own a car for 6 months. It was a miserable experience, not just the cost of car ownership and gas and insurance and repairs, but every single night I had to spend half an hour looking for parking, and when I didn't do a good job of parking, SFMTA provided me with a ticket. So it was a very exciting moment when about 2 years ago, then City Administrator Ed Lee and I had a conversation with the CEO of City CarShare about what we could do to expand CarShare in a neighborhood that is incredibly dense and that does not have the parking lots and the garages where City CarShare and Zipcar often put their cars. We know that we have very challenged streets when it comes to transit. Everyone who rides a car, anyone who tries to take a bus, tries to catch a cab, knows the challenges that we have in these very dense neighborhoods. And so the thought of expanding car sharing, which you will hear often takes anywhere from 10 to 15 cars off the streets, was something that we wanted to try here in Russian Hill. My office worked with several Russian Hill neighborhood associations to suggest places on our streets for car sharing to become a reality. And I want to thank Mayor Lee for his commitment literally now almost 2 years ago to work with my office, the SFMTA, the City Administrator's office to really figure out how we could roll out this new and exciting pilot project. And you're going to hear more about these details, but the thing I will say in conclusion is with the city family coming together, we are going to provide another transit option for all of San Francisco to hopefully bring us closer to our vision of a transit-first city. With that, I'd like to welcome Mayor Lee to Russian Hill and welcome. Mayor Lee has been a champion for car sharing and obviously making sure we have a transit-first city, and I'd like to invite him to say a few words.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, President Chiu. Yes, it was over 2 years ago where we began this conversation, but it also began with our own city fleet. And we were talking with City CarShare and Zipcar about how we could share vehicles and reduce carbon emissions and all those great goals that Mayor Gavin Newsom had announced that we wanted to really do enthusiastically. So if you see right in front of City Hall, the example that we gave everybody, the green car showcase, that began with our effort to signal that we were willing to even give up city parking spaces. You know how valuable city parking spaces are? We have wars within city government around whose parking spaces those are. But to signal a big cultural change, one that we felt was important to our future of the city and reducing cars, we made it our own goal to reduce our own city fleet and begin with that commitment first. So we did it. We did it with everybody's cooperation, MTA, our city administrator, as well as our purchaser, to create that green car showcase. But we also realized that there are many parts of the city, as David had mentioned, that don't have a ready access to public garages. And so it was, for us, a challenge, but one that we were very enthusiastic to try to pilot with City CarShare, and that is to get it into our most congested residential areas like Russian Hill and the area. So this is one of at least 5 spots that are happening, and in fact, around this area, we're going to begin here first because we have a lot of residential support for this as well. And I look forward to the other 6 spots that we have already identified and been under planning discussions with our city administrator, with our MTA, where we'll bring in a neighborhood where I live in Glen Park, but also Bayview, also Dogpatch, those areas, as well as the Outer Sunset and the Inner Sunset. Those are areas as well there where we can really benefit from car sharing. You know, I got educated really quickly over 2.5 years ago about a culture change in sharing cars. And while I know in this city we're trying to retain families, and I know David is still single, so he's going to be able for a while to get without a car. But once you get married, David, and once there's that first child, then the pressure of having a vehicle becomes a very big reality. and to have alternatives to that. And I think, you know, in reality terms, it's not so much just that first vehicle. Really, it's to prevent families from having to think about a second vehicle when they live in these residential tight areas, and to use Muni as much as possible. This is where we want to go. And I think we have a great partner to begin with in City CarShare, because as a nonprofit, they know, and they've really been working with us closely, not only with our own fleet, but now the exposure to residential areas. I can't wait to get car sharing into even public housing, because you've seen some of the large parking areas near public housing, and to be able to use that space to car share for our low-income residents, to make sure that they don't feel the pressures to have to not only buy a car to get around the city to their jobs, but also to repair their cars on those very valuable open spaces that we have. That's going to be, I think, a big culture change as well. So I'm a big fan of this, and I have been gratified in working with David Chiu on this incredible experiment that I think is going to prove very successful. And the great thing about it is that the inertia is coming from residents themselves. They're willing to offer up in a very positive way their own spaces that they've been competing for every single night, to be able to use car sharing as a philosophy. And I think that that's going to come into very good practice, as it's been with our own city fleet. So I want to congratulate David for working with city government and all the agencies here, and also with City CarShare to have a great partner in doing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Lee, and thank you for mentioning my marital status in a way that will stress out my mother. I also want to echo one thing that Mayor Lee just said. For folks who own cars, who have to own cars in San Francisco, they may ask, what is the benefit of on-street car sharing for them? The fact of the matter is, for every car that we put on the street, we are taking many cars off the street. So we're actually making it easier for everyone to find parking spaces. I also want to mention that over the past couple years, there have been a number of initiatives in the car sharing space here in San Francisco. I was proud to carry legislation to require new developments to up the number of car sharing spots that they have in their garages and in their spaces, so that, again, we could expand this throughout the city. One incredible partner in this effort has been our San Francisco MTA, and I want to invite up Ed Riskin, who has been a champion of many modes of transit, but particularly car sharing, to say a few words today. Ed.
Thank you, President Chiu, Mr. Mayor. Very glad to be here today as the city's transportation director, leading the agency that's charged with implementing the Transit First policy. We see car sharing as very integral to making Transit First work here in San Francisco. Transit First is about making it convenient and accessible and attractive for people to live in San Francisco without a car, certainly without a second car. And there are times while we want people to be able to ride and want to ride Muni, or to get around by bike or by foot or grab a cab when they need one, there are times when you need a car. And speaking as someone who's has no car and is married and has kids, it's doable in San Francisco because car sharing fills that gap. Car sharing is what makes it possible to live in San Francisco without owning your own car. So we see it as very much integral to the Transit First policy. And as President Chiu mentioned, we see it as part of our parking solution. We are not taking away parking spaces by making them available for car share. We are adding parking capacity to the city by making spaces available to car share, because those 10 or 15 people who are going to be using this one car behind us are not going to be bringing their own cars to the neighborhood to park, to compete for those same spaces, and to be circling around, creating pollution and congestion that fouls our air and slows our transit. So it's really a win-win solution. It's great for parking. It's great for implementing Transit First. We're very proud to be working with the mayor, the board president, the city administrator's office to make this happen. We will be working with all of the partners here, City CarShare, as well as the neighborhoods, to evaluate this over the next 6 months. And like the mayor, we're very optimistic that it'll be successful. So thank you all for the leadership and support, and it's a great day for Transit First.
So it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who, after our then city administrator became our interim mayor, it fell upon her shoulders to actually figure out how to implement the details of this pilot program. Our Interim City Administrator Amy Brown.
Thank you, President Chiu and Mr. Mayor. Yes, I inherited a really great idea and had lots of help from our Fleet Director, Tom Fung, and Deputy City Administrator and Purchaser, Naomi Kelly, and working with Ed staff at the SFMTA to implement it. So very exciting day to see this come to fruition. One of the things that makes it so great to work for San Francisco is that we're not afraid to do bold things and innovative things. And I will share with you that we had put together a pilot with 5 spaces citywide that we were going to move forward. And when it got to public hearings, when it got to the board, rather than have people react negatively to it, they reacted very positively, and they said that 5 spaces actually weren't enough. So we ended up being able to add 6 more spaces to the pilot program. So people wanted to go more big and more bold, and our leaders wanted to do that. And that makes it exciting every day to come in and to have those new ideas when they're so well received. So I think that this is going to be a great success. I think just the initial response to it, with people saying, "What about my neighborhood? Let's try it out in my neighborhood," is very positive, and I really look forward to seeing this rolled out beyond the pilot, citywide, and for a long time to come. So thank you all very much.
Our final speaker, who helps to run the organization that is managing the fleet of City CarShare, is Laura Haber. I do want to, though, take a moment to pull out my own City CarShare key fob with this piece of plastic. In about 2 minutes, either on a phone or on a computer, you can actually access any of the cars in the entire fleet the City CarShare has. Zipcar also has a similar arrangement. With that, I'd like to invite up Laura, who is here on behalf of Rick Hutchinson. Rick and the CEO of Zipcar actually met with Mayor Lee and I 2 years ago to kick off the discussion around this pilot project, and we very much want to thank City CarShare for being a great partner with the city.
Thank you, President Chiu, Mr. Mayor. I am Laura Haber, Director of Marketing Planning for City CarShare, and as was just alluded to, I'm here on behalf of Rick Hutchinson, who sends his regrets. He really wishes he could be here because, as it's been mentioned, this program has been 2 years in the making. Rick is the CEO and is now presenting at the International Car Sharing Association in Montreal as we speak. So car sharing is being promoted worldwide, just so you know, not just here in San Francisco. I want to thank, again, Mr. Mayor, President Chiu, for their early vision and leadership in this program, and the SFMTA and the city administrators, obviously, have been a pleasure to work with operationally. We're very excited about the launch of this pilot program for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that it raises the profile of car sharing in our communities. And one of the aspects of that is making it both more visible in the community with these very prime locations in congested neighborhoods, and it also makes it more accessible for people because many of our, what we call pods, which is where cars are located, or in private garages or public garages, and they're not as visible to the community. And when these dense neighborhoods, car sharing does a couple of things. Number one, it puts people into a shared vehicle experience, and they rely more on other forms of public transportation, walking, biking, which is all to the greater good of a more livable and environmentally conscious city. Alone last year, our members saved 40 to 60 million pounds of CO2, which is astonishing given we have about 14,000 members, roughly over 9,000 here in San Francisco alone, and we have a fleet of about 350 cars. So if you do the math, you realize that we can serve a lot of people with a lot fewer cars in San Francisco, and everybody is quite happy to get around. And I think the neighbors and the neighborhoods will be happy as well, because one of the other benefits of car sharing, besides the environmental benefit, is an economic benefit both to the individual, because they save about $700 a month on car-related expenses. Most people don't realize that's what you pay if you add up gas, maintenance, registration. When you share a car for an hour or half a day, you don't pay for gas, you don't pay for maintenance, and you don't pay for insurance. And we have one of the best insurance programs in the country. So with that, I'd like to say that this pilot program is something we're studying. That's been mentioned. We want to make sure it's effective for the neighborhoods, it's effective for users, and we're going to look at the user experience. And one of the last things, again, with the vitality of the neighborhoods, is all that extra money that's not being spent on your car movement can be spent by walking around in the local merchants. So not to leave that out of the equation. So that in mind, I'd like to demonstrate that I also have a handy electronic key fob, which I can show you how it works. It's very simple, and I'm a recent convert. I recently gave up my own car, and I've never been happier. This is practically free compared to what I was paying for my car, and I have the freedom to park wherever there's a pod. And as I said, everything else is included. So I will go around to the other side and show you how it works. The other thing I would tell you is that it takes, as was mentioned, just a few minutes to make a reservation online or on the phone. And all you do is you get in and you go and you return it to the same location. It's that simple. Membership fees are very nominal, and they are annual or monthly depending on your needs. So here I go. The key, therefore, I can give them back. And I could drive away, but I'm told I don't need to do that. Sorry. Turn back to the space. That's part of it.
Turn it on.